Alia Celeste. She looked just like me.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. Welcome to Still a Part of Us. We are so pleased to be here with you today and to hear this next story of Alia. Evelina reached out to us, and with it, just such a heavy heart to hear that she was experiencing it. She reached out to us last year, and she had just had her loss, and so grateful that she wants to tell her story, wants to tell her daughter's story, and have everybody know her. So welcome so much, Evelina. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Winter. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I know it's been a long time coming, but I think it was divine timing actually, because her 1 year of her passing will be in 2 days. So I've been in this bubble of feeling the grief pretty heavy again, just remembering that day. But it's such an honor to be able to share her story.
Yeah. I got chills when we talked about that. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like in 2 days. And I just so grateful that we are able to honor her that way. And so, Evelina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you guys located in the country, and what do you do? Get just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, my husband and I have been married since 2021, and we do have a 2-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And we reside in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in California.
Okay.
And we actually just moved here after our loss, and that will be part of our story, a huge part of our story.
Yeah.
But I am a nurse. I currently am actually a stay-at-home mom, but I was a nurse for about 5 years, working in hospitals and home health. And my husband is a mental health therapist, and he works for a nonprofit that places him at a middle school currently. So he's doing therapy with middle schoolers.
Great. So you guys are busy and very, I'm sure, enjoying life. And you have a 2-year-old now. And so, I'm sure she keeps you quite busy.
Oh, yeah. She keeps me on my feet all the time.
Awesome. And what do you guys like to do as a family?
Well, we live here on 3 acres, just about. So we have been pretty busy trying to get ready for spring and summer. We built a greenhouse a little while ago, and I have my little herbs growing in there. And then my husband actually today just ordered some chicks. So they'll be coming in a few weeks. We're going to make the chicken coop and all that.
Oh
so
my gosh.
We're doing a lot of like homesteading, homemaking stuff. I love baking sourdough, making things from scratch. Yeah, that's kind of what I love to do right now.
Amazing. That sounds like such a idyllic life that you guys have built, and so fun. Okay,
Great.
Wonderful. And so just to back up a little bit, so your daughter that is 2, did you guys, have you guys always wanted a family? And
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I have a twin sister, and it's just us two, which was amazing growing up with, a best friend like that. But I know that I've known that I've always wanted a big family. So when I had my daughter, I automatically knew like I wanted her to have a sibling.
Yeah.
And so when we found out that we were pregnant with Alia, we were just over the moon, super excited. We got pregnant 8 months after I had Avani. So Avani's my first daughter. So we were just excited for that journey, but obviously things took a turn for the worse.
So it sounds like you didn't have any issues getting pregnant with Alia, right?
Correct. Yeah, we didn't struggle with infertility. I know that a lot of moms out there do, but we just felt like a closer age gap was ideal for our family, and especially me being a twin, like I wanted that for my daughter. But yeah, it was pretty smooth. I mean, getting pregnant up until we had our fetal anatomy scan is when we realized that something wasn't quite right.
Right. So you got pregnant, and was that a little bit of surprise? Because if it was just 8 months after you had your first daughter, then that's always a little tricky. It's like, oh, am I on birth control, or are we gonna just try and get
Hmm.
pregnant, or
Hmm.
just see how it goes? Is that what you guys just kind of planned to just let it wing it?
Yeah, we just wanted to let it be and see what
Okay.
happens. We just
Yeah.
left it to God. I
Yeah.
personally felt mentally ready
Okay.
to try again. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was fine. And what happened when you found out, or when you're like, I think I'm pregnant? You want-
Yeah, so I remember taking a test super early in the morning before I went to work that day, and the line was just super faint, but I remember being like, yeah, I know I am. I feel it in my body, like something's
a little
happening.
different. Mm-hmm.
And my husband was just like, okay, well, that's great, let's do it. So yeah, I think the day after I took another test and the line was a little bit darker, so that was more confirmation.
Yeah.
Um, I think my husband took a little bit longer to accept it. He was a little bit in denial at first, but I just told him one day, I'm like, listen, I'm nauseous, I'm pregnant, like it's a fact.
It's happening, whether you like it
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
uh, that's super fun. And did you tell your family kind of right away, or
That's a good question. Looking back, I know with Avani we told them pretty quickly, but
mhm.
I think this time around we also didn't wait that long to tell anyone. I think I wanted to wait for like that first initial ultrasound
Right.
to make sure that there
To
was a
confirm.
heartbeat, and there was.
Yeah.
So I think about 8 to 10 weeks, we told some family members,
Okay.
like my husband's parents and my parents and my sister,
Yeah.
that we were having another baby.
Yeah. That's so
So,
fun. It's just fun
mhm,
for the family.
yeah.
Are both of your families kind of in that same area? Are you guys sort of close by?
At the time, yes, my parents were, I think they were actually living maybe a few hours away, and my in-laws lived in the same town at
Oh,
the
great.
time.
Okay.
So,
So
yeah,
close-ish, close by.
super close. Yeah,
Great.
our
Okay.
family's really close, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. I that
Yeah,
is a huge blessing. And your twin sister also kind of lives in that same area too?
she lives in the same town. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
Mhm.
So you checked so you got the positive pregnancy tests, and then did you go in pretty quickly then in order to just make sure levels were good, or
Mhm.
doing that first ultrasound then? And about
Yeah,
how when about what time did that happen?
I think it was about 8 weeks
So it was
when
okay.
we were able to get our first appointment in. So yeah, it was pretty early on, and
Mhm.
um, after that, we waited for like the blood work to come back, and then they did all the DNA testing, genetic testing, and things
Oh,
like
okay.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty smooth.
Okay, great. And you guys did opt for the genetic testing then? Cuz that is not always a like for sure type of thing. It seems like it's an optional
Yeah, they
thing.
made it seem like it was an optional, um, thing that we can choose, but we
Mhm.
decided to go for it, and ended up being a pretty good idea later on, and I'll explain a little
Oh,
bit
okay.
later.
Okay, great. What
Yeah.
when that did come back, did that how did that look?
It looked normal. I think from my side, it looked normal, but I think there was something a little bit off with my husband's side of the genetics. And
Mhm.
I think later on is when they started to talk to us more about it. Not early on, but once the pregnancy started getting a little bit more complicated, they pulled in, what do you call it, like a
A
genetic
genetic counselor.
counselor, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were talking to us a little bit more frequently towards the end of the pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then did you go back to your same OBGYN that you had with your first daughter?
Yes, actually. Actually, no, I'm
Mm.
lying. That's for. No, so we actually went with another hospital, the same kind of hospital chain, but a different location,
Mhm.
just because it was closer to us at the time, and it ended up being a huge blessing because they have a really good team of maternal fetal medicine providers there
Awesome.
that are pretty well known in the area in Northern California. And so we I distinctly remember like that fetal anatomy scan at
Mhm.
about 20 weeks it was for Alia. that provider happened to be there because they went to different hospitals, and so they weren't always there. But
Yeah.
that day they ended up being there, which is a huge blessing because that's when we got like the really bad news that my daughter was diagnosed with a CPAM, and that stands for congenital pulmonary airway malformation.
Okay.
And straight from the start, I mean, he didn't sugarcoat anything.
Really? Okay.
And I think that's one regret that I have is that I went to this appointment alone because I had scheduled my daughter's 1 year appointment the same day at the same time because the offices were close by. So my husband took her over there and
Oh.
I went to my anatomy scan alone.
Oh.
I never thought anything bad was going to happen from that.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking that everything was normal, but
Because everything was normal. Every indication was
Mhm.
kind of like, it's fine. I'm nauseous. Like it's the
Mhm.
kind of the same old for the first trimester, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't think anything of it. And the scan did take a little bit longer
Mm-hmm.
than previously, but I didn't think anything of it. I just thought they were being really thorough. But then they said that they were going to walk me to the maternal fetal medicine provider's office. I didn't know at the time what that was, honestly. So I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. I got to talk to the doctor after. That's nice. I didn't get that
Yeah.
last time.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting in that chair and the provider just said, I'm just going to put it bluntly, your daughter has a really big lung malformation. And they said that it was one of the biggest ones that they've ever seen
Oh.
this early on. And so, right from the start, I know this is kind of controversial, but they suggested terminating the pregnancy because, from their experience, they knew how severe it was and that the prognosis was not good at all.
Yeah.
That was a hard pill for me to swallow. And like hearing all that was just a shock. It didn't even register, to be honest. I was just like, wait, something's wrong with her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's terminal. Like that just didn't, I don't know. It
Didn't.
took a long time for that to sink in. And so I kind of just stopped the doctor there and I was like, wait, can I call my husband? Because he's almost done with my daughter's appointment. Like I would love for him to hear this on his own.
Yes.
And I remember them being like, yeah, sure, we'll pause now and you can go out to the lobby and parking lot and get him. And so I remember walking down the hospital. I was like numb at this point and just I felt like I was walking on clouds, but like a dark cloud.
Yeah.
And walking out to the parking lot, I saw my husband parking because he had just come to my hospital and he was just joking around, like pretending to drive away without me, whatever, just his normal jokes.
Yeah.
But then I told him, like, no, like, you have to come here. We have to come inside, like, now. I'm like, something's not right. Something's wrong. And then he just saw it in my face that I wasn't playing around. And so he took her daughter and we came back up, same room. And I I asked the doctor to just repeat himself for my husband. And then that's when things got pretty serious because I mean they're experts in the field. They've seen all types of malformations in fetuses, and they said that yes, there might be some options that we can do to make the malformation shrink over time, or I don't know, just it's very few things that we could have done for that CPAM. It's a type of CPAM that you can't drain with shunts. It was like
Mm.
a hard mass. So I remember it was a day before Thanksgiving that we got that news
Oh.
um, last year. And I remember asking him, like, do I have a day to process this and like figure out what to do? And
Yeah.
they said, as much as we want to say no, like, sure, we'll give you a day, but every day matters now that we know how severe it is. So I said, okay, we'll just, sleep on it overnight. We'll pray. I don't know, do our own research because I've never heard of a CPAM before.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 1 in 30,000 diagnosis,
Yeah.
like the
It,
rarity is pretty high. So
how did the doctors describe what a CPAM was, and especially the way it presented in your daughter?
that's a good question. So they say that it's random, it's not a genetically linked
Mm-hmm.
malformation, and it forms early on at about 9 weeks gestation when the lungs are forming.
Mm-hmm.
apparently the cells just didn't come together the right way. And so it acts like a tumor where it does grow over time. A lot of CPAMs, however, tend to stabilize in the late second trimester to early third trimester. And then a lot of babies do survive with CPAMs and they're able to get the part of the lung or the lobe surgically removed at about 3 months of age once they're out. But
Okay.
our type of CPAM was just, first of all, it was bigger so early,
Yeah.
and it was a type of malformation that can't be, like I said, it wasn't fluid fill cyst like other
Mm-hmm.
types are. Ours was more like hard mass cysts
Yeah.
that just kept growing and like multiplying, kind of like a tumor would.
Yeah.
So
And
that's how
that
they
obvious
described it.
and that would
Hmm.
obviously, I mean, it would, as the name suggests, that it obstructs the airway, right? So there would be
Oh,
difficulty for the
hmm,
lungs to develop and for your daughter to breathe. I mean, it sounds like
absolutely.
it would
Oh,
be,
yes.
the quality of life would be very, if they survived, very drastic, right?
Yeah, very, very drastic. Exactly. And then that's a good segue to how the pregnancy went. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely horrible.
Oh,
Um, After that, they had us go weekly to get ultrasounds to measure the CPAM, and they use a measurement called the CVR.
mm-hmm.
Basically, it's where they measure like the baby's head and chest in relation to the mass to see if it's growing with the baby or staying small compared to the baby's growth.
Right.
So because the CPAM was so large and because it was growing, we started noticing that the so it was in her right lung, right? So the right lung mass was displacing the heart to the
Oh,
other side of the chest
oh,
completely, and it wasn't allowing room in the chest for her left lung to develop and grow.
okay.
So those were the two things that we were just kind of, you know, hoping and praying would get better, but I ended up getting, I think, 2 rounds of steroid injections meant to mature the lungs a little
Okay.
bit faster in
Okay.
case we had to deliver her early, but they did not work. um, I remember at this time I was working as a travel nurse. So I was working bedside, I was walking around a lot. And I think when I was 24 weeks along, I was having contractions throughout my whole 12-hour shift. And then I realized, you know what? I probably should just go get checked out because these contractions are getting stronger. So I remember being wheeled to the ER of that hospital I was working at, transferred to another hospital because the one that I was working didn't have an OB department. And sure enough, they monitored me and they said that I was going into preterm labor
Oh
at
God.
24 weeks. And so they were monitoring the contractions. They gave me magnesium. They gave me these pills to stop the contractions, which ended
Mhm.
up working. I was hospitalized, I think, for 2 or 3 days. And in that hospitalization, we found out another complication, which was that I was having extra amniotic fluid. So I had polyhydramnios, and it was severe. There's like little scales of if the AFI is
Mhm.
less than 20, then I think it's normal, and then the higher it goes, the more severe it is. And I was at 45.
Oh gosh.
So that was, I mean, I was just miserable winter. I
Yeah.
couldn't drink, I couldn't eat because my uterus was so distended, filled with all this fluid
Oh.
that I was becoming malnourished and dehydrated. I was pale, my voice changed, my heart rate skyrocketed. Like my baseline resting was 135
Oh my gosh. That
for
is
my heart rate, and that is obviously
so
like a running heart rate.
yeah.
So that's when things started getting pretty ugly for us. I was very depressed, going into the weekly scans, hearing that the mass grew a little bit more. And then the
Yeah.
week later, it grew a little bit more. It would not like shrink, and we were just so desperate to try to find answers. I remember my husband reaching out to other children's hospitals in the country to see if there's anything they can do, but the hospitals reached back saying that it's not safe for me to fly because of how like severe my pregnancy is going. Like I
Yeah.
could go into preterm labor in the air and that would be horrible. So they politely declined. But I think I remember at that time just feeling hopeless because there's nothing that I could have done, nothing could have eaten, drank,
Yep.
done to help shrink that mass. It was kind of out of my control at that point. And I remember, I think the day after or 2 days after I was discharged from that hospital stay, I asked my doctor if they can please remove some fluid from me because I am just absolutely miserable. Like I'm not even eating at this point. And
Exactly.
I remember them looking at me and saying, "Yeah, you look absolutely miserable. Like let's schedule it for this Friday." So I remember going in for what they call an amnio reduction, where
Yeah.
they stick
Just
a needle into your
mm-hmm.
uterus and they drain some fluid, right? They ended up draining 3 liters out from that first time.
That
I ended
is
up having it twice, 3 liters each time.
oh my
And let me
gosh.
tell you, like each time was such a relief.
Yeah.
I literally felt my organs shift down and I
Oh,
could breathe better. I could take a deep breath. Finally, like I remember knowing that even though it was like a temporary fix, it was what I wanted immediately
yeah.
at that
Yeah.
time
To be able to
to feel
breathe,
some sort of
essentially.
comfort.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Evelina, I just can I just back up for 1 second? I know we kind of jumped the gun a little bit at your 20-week visit. You had mentioned that they gave you guys kind of a lot of options, and one of them was terminating the pregnancy. And I know that you guys got the time to talk about it as a family and pray about it. So, it sounds like you guys felt like it was something that you should continue on with. Is
Hmm.
that right?
Yeah, that's something that I it didn't really stay on my mind for more than a few seconds
Okay.
because I didn't feel like it was my decision to make,
Okay.
taking her life at that time. I know that there's so many other situations out there where the mom's maybe their only option, but for us, I think I thought about my future self and I thought I don't think I could live with myself
Gotcha.
if I had terminated,
Yeah.
and not known what would have happened otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. I realized we hadn't talked about that, and I
Mhm.
wanted to because I think somebody's your faith and your yeah, like you said, being able to live with yourself plays a lot of
Mhm.
how I mean the fact that you're so miserable at week 24 is that
Yeah.
I mean that is a testament to you're like yeah I feel like this is not in my hands and so
Yeah.
okay so you were discharged at that time and the doctors were just kind of watching you. How did it go the following week? And were you just still filling up with fluid, I guess,
I
from
was, and the doctors did tell me that it's just a temporary fix, that in about 5 to 7 days, it would
oh,
all just come right back.
yeah.
So, but I was just so desperate. I remember it being around Christmas of last year. I just wanted to feel somewhat comfortable. So I ended up opting for that amnio reduction a couple of days before Christmas. And then I remember the day after Christmas, we had our fetal MRI scheduled
Okay.
2 hours away. So that was mainly to see more in detail the composition of the malformation to see if there
Okay.
was anything else that we could do
Mhm.
at that time to help shrink it or whatever. I remember hearing a lot about CPAM resections in the womb, like in utero, that
Yeah.
there's technology out there that permits, them to do like a surgery like that. And I was hoping that that could be our case, but
Mhm.
like I said earlier, our CPAM was so severe and just like a different type that it wouldn't
It
have been a
mhm.
good option. So I kept going in for weekly scans. The mass just kept growing, and I remember I think at about 20 weeks is when the doctors were telling us that at 20 weeks the CPAMs are supposed to stabilize, that they're not supposed to grow anymore, that the babies are going to outgrow them, and then it's just going to end up being like a tiny little speck in the bottom of the lung. But obviously for our case that was not
Yeah.
true, and it ended up being the reason that she passed because her heart just couldn't
Oh,
beat anymore. There's no room in her chest anymore. Her other lung didn't even develop. It stayed a sliver, like
uh,
a sliver of tissue. And something else too that happened with Alia was that she started developing scalp edema. So I think because she
Oh,
wasn't able to swallow the amniotic fluid correctly, it was kind of building up in her
in
scalp.
her.
And so on the ultrasounds, you can see like a thick layer of fluid between her skin and her skull. And then it wrapped all the way to the back. And that space or that fluid just kept getting thicker and thicker with each
Oh,
ultrasound too. So uh, yeah, and each time we would go in, they would suggest termination because I mean they just saw what was going on. And each time I think as time went on, because I'm a nurse and I understand medicine too, I understand anatomy and all that, honestly, I felt pretty stupid and dumb for continuing the pregnancy at this point because I saw it too, like I saw how severe her condition was, and I just felt kind of, like I said, stupid for being in the medical field and ignoring that part and just going with my mom instincts of like wanting to hold on to
yeah.
her. And I think that was one of the hardest parts for me was to rationalize that or reconcile that somehow in my head because of who I was as a nurse and a mother.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do that. I just swallowed those feelings of shame that, come on, like, the science, the medical reasons, all these professional doctors are telling you that she's not going to make it and you're still here suffering. Why don't you just end it? Like, it's so much easier for you. You're going to be able to breathe and eat and drink water. Like, but I couldn't.
Yeah, like you said, those mom instincts really just kick in and you just want to
Yeah.
take care of.
You just want to fight for them, even though you're dying. I mean, the doctors were telling me like something's got to give because I mean, I lost weight in terms of like my
Your
muscle mass.
yeah.
My belly was huge, but my muscle mass, my legs and arms, I was pale. I was just I was depressed. I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hard. What did your husband say about I knowing my husband, he would have been so concerned for me and just wanting to make sure that I am okay, and I suspect your husband is the same way, just
He was super concerned but I think he was the strength and rock that I needed, and he would remind me, that the reason why we're continuing this is because we're going to leave it in God's hands, and I wanted that too. It's just when those days got really hard, he was there to remind me that we're going to keep praying, we're going to do everything that we can for our daughter and see what happens.
yeah. Yeah. Um okay, so we're looking at around Christmas time. That was can you tell me what week about that was for you?
Yeah, the last week of December, that's when the MRI happened. That's when, we
Okay.
realized that this mass was not, it wasn't anything that we can do. We were basically just monitoring at this point and
Okay.
praying for a miracle
Yeah.
that somehow it would shrink, that somehow she could recover and bounce back.
Yeah. I know.
Hmm.
Yeah. We pray for miracles, right?
Yeah.
When um and so you're closer to like were you close to like 28, 30 weeks at that
So
time?
at this time, it was, I want to say 25, 26.
Okay.
Yeah. Because by New Year's, I was 26, 27 weeks, I
Okay.
remember. And yeah, so monitoring week by week, sometimes it only the mass grew by point 0.1 of the measurement. Other times it jumped up two whole numbers. And
Oh.
so I remember on January 9th, actually, that whole day I just felt so heavy, just so heavy. I was going through my daily routine with I think she was 14 months at the time, my daughter. But I just like I couldn't smile genuinely that day. I remember feeling so heavy, just hopeless, depressed. I think I had already started therapy. So I was meeting with a therapist pretty regularly, like every week or 2 weeks, kind of pre-grieving, honestly. I did a lot of that just because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I think in my head, I was trying to protect my future self from heartbreak in case something went wrong. But I remember on the 9th that I just felt so like the dark cloud wouldn't leave. It was just hovering over me constantly. And I just couldn't shake off this feeling that my daughter was going to die. And like, like the feeling of when is it going to happen? Is it going to happen now? Or maybe it already did. Or it was hard to feel her kicks because of how much fluid she was swimming in, so I couldn't really feel movement that much. And so I remember that night, I I told my husband, like, hey, I haven't really felt her move all day. And I don't know if it's just me, because that's not the first time I've said that. I just said, I don't know if I'm in my head today. I just haven't felt her move. And he goes, well, you always say that. I'm like, I know, but today, like, it's just been so weird. Like, I just haven't been feeling right. And so because I was so anxious during this pregnancy, I ended up purchasing a Doppler.
Okay.
Um, I know a lot of
Yeah.
people don't recommend that, but I did. And so I pulled it out and I started scanning my belly. I think this was actually the night of the 10th, now that I think about it. But
Mhm.
um, I started scanning my belly and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the heartbeat. She kind of lived in my lower right quadrant, but I couldn't find it. And so my husband was watching a show, I remember, and he realized like I was taking a while to find it. And so
Mhm.
he's like, let me see. And he started like he asked me to turn on one side and the other side. Um, and he couldn't find it either. And that's when the panic started setting into me in my head and my heart. I was like, oh no, this can't be, no way. And by this time, I've had like a hospital bag packed for weeks already because of how many times the doctors were telling me that she could be she could pass at any time.
Yeah.
So I remember that night my husband called my father-in-law that lived 2 blocks away to come and watch my daughter, even though she was asleep already. It was late, and so he came over. We rushed to the hospital. It was a 45-minute drive, and the whole way I was looking out the window, just crying, saying like, no, please, let's just be a joke. Like, this is not real. Like, they're gonna find it and then we're just gonna be home. Like, whew, thank God, like it was just a fluke or
Yeah.
whatever. um I remember going into the ER, telling them I need to go to L&D right now, and without question the nurse walked us up there, got checked in. And I remember at this time I asked to go to the bathroom because I wanted to take one last picture of me with my bump. I knew it was going to be the last one. You're a mom, like something's not right. And so I remember I had my hair up in a claw clip. I had my glasses on, that I had a gown on, or I think my gray hoodie. And I just took pictures and a few videos of me caressing my belly because I wanted to pretend that she was still in there, like she was still alive, but I knew that she wasn't. And um, once we got triage into her room, the nurse said that they were going to bring in 2 providers because in the hospital, at least the hospital that I was in, they require 2 providers to confirm a lack of a heartbeat. So when they brought the ultrasound machine in there, I was so nervous. I was like, this is it. This is the moment we find out. And sure enough, they put the probe on my belly. Other times I would see her squish little heart valves moving, but this time they weren't moving. And she was just lifeless, curled in the fetal position, just lifeless on the screen. And I remember the doctor telling us, I'm sorry, Evelina, but we are confirming the reason why you came in here is because she doesn't have a heartbeat, but I need to get my colleague in here to confirm. So within a minute, the other provider was in, and he also confirmed that he touched my leg and said, I'm so sorry, and left. At that time, I didn't cry because I was in such shock. I looked at my husband, and he was sitting to my left. We just like stared at each other, like, what now? Like, all that suffering for nothing. It just felt so wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but shortly after that, the nurses came in and they started talking about delivery options, which, you know, I had to get her out, right? Which in my head seemed a little like too quick, but also I get it. She has to come out. I think I just wanted to hold on to her a little bit longer to myself, but
Yeah.
the hospital has policies and stuff. So they told me that because I was only 28 weeks and 6 days along, that she was going to be tiny. And so they recommended a vaginal delivery. They saw that I had a C-section with my first daughter, so they knew that I had done that before, and they offered it to me as well. But I ended up going for the vaginal delivery option. And so they told me that I would be admitted into the L&D department. Um, they let me rest overnight, make sure like I'm hydrated enough. And then the next morning they were going to start me on Pitocin to induce my labor. And they were going to, try to get her out the next day.
Yeah. Were you contracting at all or anything? I know that in the past you had some kind of preterm contractions and that type of thing.
I actually was not
Okay.
contracting. I think they had me on some medication for a few weeks after that hospitalization stay to keep the contractions at bay, which ended up working. So no, I wasn't contracting.
Okay.
But I remember the night before, now knowing that I was going to meet her the next day. Ooh, it was so hard because I was scared that my mind was going to break. I was scared that I wasn't able, or I wasn't going to be able to survive meeting my daughter like that still. In my nursing career, I've always taken care of adults, so I've never been around sick children or sick babies, or even those that have passed. So for the first exposure to have been my own daughter was just terrifying.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was going to be mentally sane after that experience. So I actually have my journal here that I took with me to the hospital. I journaled a lot that night and the morning of, because I just wanted something documented in case I did lose my mind, that I wanted people to know what I was thinking right before the traumatic event of delivering a stillborn daughter.
Yeah.
So yeah, the morning after about 10, they induced me, and then they actually suggested to insert like one of those balloons, cervical balloons. So they did that. And the contractions started, amping up pretty quickly. And so the nurse suggested I get an epidural because she didn't want to see me in physical pain more than the emotional that I was already dealing with. So I agreed. Unfortunately, the epidural only lasted 15 minutes, and for some reason it just wore off. So I ended up feeling absolutely everything, which was another layer to the trauma.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. And my husband is traumatized from my screams.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was so, so painful. And by the time I felt the urge to push, I was just like, here we go. Like this is not, I just there's no words to describe that experience. In the room, I only had my husband. I think my mother was on her way, and my my in-laws were in the waiting room. So I remember the nurses getting ready. The provider came in, introduced herself, super sweet, and um, just instructed me to start pushing. But honestly, I was so weak. I had no strength. And I remember pretending to push, but I knew I wasn't doing anything at all to help them. They were pulling her out of me, basically. But it hurt so bad. I was just screaming things in my mind. I think at that time, my mind did break just a little bit because I didn't even know what I was screaming. And I think at one point I heard myself say, like, oh, and I'm screaming this. I'm saying it calm now, but I'm screaming this, like, why isn't she alive? Why is she dead? Why does she have to be dead? Why isn't she alive? Like, I'm so sad. Like, oh, so I was screaming that and then just screaming and like biting my husband's finger off with each push, and so they eventually got her out and they put her in like a little baby blanket and put her in my arms. I was just so exhausted and fatigued from the pain that I just like laid my head back a little bit and I don't know, I think I just went into disassociation. The look on my face was so glazed over. It was just not like I was not mentally there at that time. Once my I think once everything was cleared out, like the placenta and everything came out, which by the way, they said that I had a huge clot come out after my placenta. And so they said that most likely what took her life was like a placental abruption.
Abruption.
And that probably explains the tachycardia I had, that I like my heart rate was increasing really
During,
fast. It was like 170s towards the end of the pregnancy, like every
yeah.
day, because
Oh,
I was
that's so
bleeding out
high.
and my heart was trying to compensate.
That is nuts.
So, yeah. And so just hearing that was like, wow, like that's just another complication that I didn't even know I had. Wow, great. But so yeah, they handed Alia to me and the nurses left. Something they did tell us was spend as much time with her as you need. We're not going to come in, we're not going to interrupt. If you want family here, we'll invite them in and we'll leave it like that. So sure enough, my in-laws came, my brother-in-law, my sister, my mom, and we all kind of held her for a little bit, each one of us, and cried. The room was silent. It was just silent.
So
No
quiet.
newborn cries,
No.
nothing like that. It was very dark. The tension was just so thick of sorrow from everyone in the room.
Yeah.
And so we held her for hours and hours. Um, I remember studying her face and realizing that she looked a lot like me. She had a lot of my features, and that made me very happy, but also very, very sad that I wasn't going to be able to see her grow up and see myself in her.
Yeah. Evelina, how
Mhm.
how big was she?
She was a tiny 2 pounds and 11 ounces.
Little itty bitty thing.
Yeah, she was super small. I think she was only 13, no, like 12 inches long or something. Like she was really small and she was born at 4:36 in the afternoon. I remember we knew Alia was going to be her first name,
Okay.
but we didn't have her middle name Celeste picked out until I think the morning of her delivery. I just thought about it and I was like, I mean, she's an angel.
Yeah.
She's in heaven,
And that, yeah.
Celeste.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that came from. But
And where did you guys
um
come up with Alia?
Alia, it's kind of a funny thing, but I really love Bollywood, and
Oh,
there's a famous actress named Alia Bhatt,
uh-huh. Yeah.
and I just love that name,
Yeah.
and I think she's a phenomenal actress, so we like
It's
that.
it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
think
beautiful,
the meaning is also like exalted in the sky or something like that. So
really,
it was very fitting too.
yeah, beautiful.
Hmm.
I'm so glad that you had family there. It's so nice for them
Too.
to meet.
Hmm.
Your daughter. I think that it's
Hmm.
just beautiful, even though, like you said, the sorrow was thick and sorrow was heavy.
Hmm.
It was probably nice to have your family there.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. And I remember hours after delivery, the nurse came in and brought like a box of little dresses and baby blankets that we could
Oh,
choose to remember her by and dress her in.
yeah.
Um, and so my mom and I chose like this cream colored dress. I think that it was made of an old like antique wedding dress that they repurposed
Oh,
into
yeah, yeah.
dresses for angel babies. And so chose that one. And then I chose this baby blanket. I actually have it right here. My cat's laying on it. This one.
Oh, look at that. How pretty is that?
And so it has like lavender, a little bit of sage green in it, and that's why I'm wearing lavender today
Yeah.
in honor of her. But we chose this blanket, that dress, and I remember my mom and I, we just, uncovered her from the blanket. We saw her little body. We dressed her in the dress, a little bonnet over her head, and just admired her
Yeah,
for a long time.
that is wonderful.
Hmm.
Were there any other things that you did with her to help make memories? It sounds like the nursing staff was awesome and tried to encourage you to do things that would
Oh,
be
absolutely.
meaningful. And so, what other things did you do?
So they gave us a memory box of things like her handprints, her footprints, her little medical bracelet. Um, there's a note from a few of the nurses that they wrote, their
Oh,
condolences on there. And so I decided to take a lot of those keepsakes and I started a scrapbook about the pregnancy and meeting her. Um, and I bring this up because it was very therapeutic to start that scrapbook and just kind of glue little ultrasound pictures on the pages and make
mm,
it really cute with the borders and writing. And but I couldn't bring myself to finish it because it felt too final. Like
yeah.
I didn't want to finish the scrapbook and I just felt so burdened by it. And further down the line, a friend of mine from college reached out because I had shared this on another podcast about the scrapbook not being finished.
Mhm.
She reached out to me and offered to finish it for me with her
Oh,
mom. And so I had actually just received it maybe like a month ago, and I'm just gonna like share the front cover of it because it's right
yeah.
here. But um, they did such a phenomenal job with the scrapbook. It's
Oh, look
much
at
bigger
that.
than the one that I started, but
Yeah, look at that.
it's I mean they have like my pregnancy pictures in here, the delivery pictures, just a lot of things in here that I need something like that to remember her by because this is like a beautiful story instead of it being so sad.
Yeah.
It's like a her life story
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So the scrapbook was a huge thing that we ended up doing to honor her. So
That's beautiful
yeah.
and so kind of your friend. I think
Oh
that's
yeah, I
amazing.
can't thank her enough.
Yeah. Because there is something, yes, you're right. Like there's something dreadful about it. Just feeling like, oh, I've finished that chapter in my book. Like you just don't
Hmm.
you realize how much that your child means to you. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's something does feel final about it.
Hmm.
um you guys did you took all the you got all the pictures. Did you guys take video and stuff too while you were there?
I did. I took
Okay.
videos, especially of her little face and her body. I just wanted to remember her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember asking for a lot of pictures with my husband and her, even though those pictures will probably never see the light of
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But they're for me
Yeah.
and my husband. Mhm.
Wonderful. Were they able to get little handprints or anything or hand molds because a
Yeah,
2-pound baby, it's that's little hands, little feet.
super tiny. But yes, they were able to do both hand and feet prints, and so
Good.
they gave us like I think two cards with each
Mm-hmm.
pair on there. So that was so nice.
Yeah.
Super
That's
tiny, like an
yeah.
inch.
Yeah. Super, super tiny. That's
Mhm.
wonderful that they did that though. I think
Yeah,
that's a very normal, like you have a baby type of thing. You do little handprints and footprints. So
right.
like that's
No, you're right.
nice to be able to have that kind of normal type
The
thing.
normalcy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming that your other daughter was too young to come to the hospital and meet her.
Yeah, I think she was there, but I was pretty cautious about her coming
Okay.
near Alia. I just didn't want her to. I know she probably was too young to even remember it,
Mhm.
but I told myself and I promised myself that there's other ways that she can learn about her sister later
Yeah.
on when she's a
Yeah.
little bit older.
Okay. That's wonderful. I like that she was there though. Like
Yeah, she
she
was
was
there.
okay. That's wonderful. How long did you guys end up keeping Alia with you?
So it was the entire day up until probably 10 at night.
Okay.
And at that point, we were ready to go to sleep. And so the nurse offered to keep her in, I think they called it a magic room.
Mm.
Basically, it's that like a cooler room where
Mm-hmm.
they keep angel babies in there in case the mother wants to see them the next day, that they're not totally,
Yeah.
decomposed.
Yeah.
Um, so we offered for that because I did want to see her again. I did want to hold her again the day after,
Mm.
which was the day that we ended up being discharged. So just the morning after, just one more time. So that's what we ended up doing. They brought her back to us the morning after, and so we just held her. We said our goodbyes. I remember the chaplain came and prayed with us, talked to us, and then we left her there. And we did end up opting for an autopsy, even though we knew that she had a CPAM diagnosis, but we did end up going for it because of the clot that was mentioned in the past.
Yeah.
Um, I was just curious, I think for closure reasons, I wanted to know if it was a CPAM or the
If
placental abruption
I
that ended
see.
up taking her life. Um, just briefly, I think the results ended up showing that the CPAM was so severe and that she did have a few genetic deficiencies with, I'm not sure exactly how they would have changed her, life growing up, but I think something with her face was not completely formed
Formed
correctly,
also.
like
Okay.
the cupid's bow was a little bit off, and then I think her nose, something about her nose being a little bit bulbous, that's what the
Mm.
word they used was, due to the genetic issue that she had.
Okay.
I'm not really sure which gene it was,
Yeah.
but there was that component there. But of course, the placental abruption didn't help
Yes.
her prognosis either.
Yeah.
So it might have been a little combination of both.
Yeah.
Um,
Up all of it.
yeah, but we went home, and it just it just felt so wrong being wheeled out of labor and delivery without your baby. And
Mhm.
I'm sure there's so many other moms that have shared that same
Yeah.
sentiment of empty-handedness, sorrow. Just it just felt wrong, like you're missing something,
Yep.
obviously. Um, so the nurse wheeled me out to the parking lot. My husband pulled the truck out, and we drove home. The 45 minutes home, it was just silence and tears. I remember the grief didn't truly hit me until the day after. I remember it being a Friday. I just got up and I just wanted to feel some sort of normalcy in my life. I just made myself a little breakfast, and then I started crying heavily because I should be feeding my newborn. I should have been up all night changing her diaper. I
Yeah.
should have not have gotten sleep because of her cries. Um, but there was none of that. The house felt so big and silent, and it was just that's when I just like I went back into the room, and I just wailed. The screams that came out of me were out of body, and my husband just held me, and I just cried in his arms. I think that was a true moment of heartbreak because it hit me then that, oh, we're going to do life without her now.
Yeah.
And that's so difficult.
So sad.
Yeah. And so I remember the months that followed. I don't know how I survived winter. I credit everything to God because humanly, there's no way possible to survive a grief like that.
Yeah.
Thank you to my family for taking care of my daughter when I couldn't get out of bed and parent her. Thank you to my husband for being strong, you know, in those times where I just wanted to crumble and just, like not be here anymore myself.
Yeah.
Um, One of the hardest things postpartum was my milk coming in
Oh,
and having to suppress that.
it is the
Oh,
worst.
that was the worst thing ever because I breastfed my daughter Avani for almost a year. And so I know how it feels like to have milk come in, encouraging it, everything like that. But this time around, I was trying to stop it. I was trying to stop my biology. I was trying to stop these hormones from keeping producing the milk. And I did like this cabbage lotion. I got cabbage leaves, ice pack, sports bras, everything. And it took about 2 weeks, but it was just so
Oh,
painful emotionally more than the physical, even
yeah.
the physical was painful too.
Yes.
But oh, I just remember every single time I had to change out the cabbage leaves and the ice packs, crying, looking at myself in the mirror, apologizing to my body for stopping something that was so normal.
Yeah.
Like I'm postpartum and I'm supposed to be feeding a baby, but there's no baby.
Yeah.
So that was a huge, huge struggle for me after the, Alia's passing and
Yeah.
just having to pick up the pieces and try to be somewhat of a good mom, a good wife. That was hard as well because I wasn't okay myself. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
yeah, I was going to say that is not something, yeah, you're not, you're not right. Like you're just not right
Hmm.
after you lose and experience something this big.
Hmm.
Yeah. Evelina,
Not at all.
I realize you gave birth to Alia one day and then you went home the next day. Were you doing okay physically? Like, because I mean, you had the clot for the placental abruption, but obviously when your water broke and everything, that probably did your body kind of normalize back to, were you okay? I guess was,
Yeah, I guess they deemed me okay. They did say that I was severely anemic, and later
yeah,
they found out why because I was bleeding
yeah,
internally. But they said that as long as I take my iron and stay hydrated and just like rest from the vaginal delivery and all that, that I would be okay.
okay,
And I was physically, I was okay,
yeah,
but it was more of a mental struggle, of course,
yes,
after. But yeah, I was okay to go the day after.
okay. And then I was going to ask, I know that
Hmm.
you, with the clot, and then also even just mentioning the severe anemia, did you notice any sort of anything that would indicate that you had a placental abruption, any bleeding or
That's
anything
the
at all?
thing. No bleeding, nothing like that. But the things that I were experiencing was extreme shortness of breath, which I
Yeah.
thought was because of the severe fluid that I had,
Yeah. Yeah.
just like pushing up on my
Oh,
lungs. So I didn't think it was because of the bleeding. And then my tachycardia,
was,
I had a really high heart rate at
yeah.
all times. And so I didn't realize it was because of the bleeding either,
Right.
because I thought it was because my heart was being displaced too from
Yeah.
how big my belly got. I just thought it was a side effect of
Yeah.
that.
Okay. But just looking back, yeah, you're like, wow, that was something completely
Yeah.
different. Did you guys end up doing any sort of memorial service or anything like that, a funeral for her? And then I guess, did you decide on anything in
Yes.
particular? Did you do did you cremate her? Did you have her buried? What did you end up deciding? Because that's one of those things that they hand to you, or with the packet
Hmm.
of things you have to decide while you're at the hospital.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I remember, I think the day after we got discharged, we had to go to the cemetery
Y-
to
Yeah.
get a slot of
Yeah.
land, you
Yeah.
know. But yes, we ended up burying her. We had a small outdoor funeral service.
Oh, okay.
We didn't really have like a church ceremony or anything like that, but we did have like a, like a burial service outside, and only immediate family were invited.
Okay.
And so it was a really small little event there, but it was perfect for what we wanted for her. And something else too was, I think it took about a month's time to order her little casket, her
Yeah.
headstone.
Okay.
Um, those are things too that just felt so transactional and like a business,
Mm-hmm.
that there was no emotion from the business side of things towards me. It was just like me designing the headstone. Like I wanted to take my time with that, but we didn't really have all year to do that.
Yeah.
And same with picking the casket. I felt like there was no casket beautiful enough to
To
measure up to her
Yeah.
impact on our lives.
Yeah.
But we ended up going with like a small 28-inch casket. It was pink and white checkered with a ribbon. And I designed the headstone just to have her name,
Yeah.
date of birth, and born sleeping on there with a little angel. And once everything was delivered to the cemetery, we had the service, and that was just so hard. I remember walking up to the little tent that they put up, with the
Yeah.
chairs. My knees just buckled underneath me because I just couldn't believe that I was going to bury my daughter. It's something that you don't even can't register at the time.
Yeah.
Wailing, crying, lots of tissues, and just the whole family took turns saying a few words of encouragement, of love, condolences, which is so nice to hear. And my husband and we also shared a few words. And then we saw them lower her to the ground, which was so heartbreaking. At the end, we released white balloons to honor her soul, and just that's how we ended the service, is releasing the balloons, which was also very heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, there's like that finality that you don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do it, but it's, yeah,
Absolutely.
feels terrible. Feels so terrible. Evelina, I'm so sorry for your loss and all that you went through. It was a rough pregnancy and a rough
Mm-hmm.
birth, and you're walking around feeling like you're missing somebody. That's like the most
Yeah,
horrible feeling. We're like, I'm missing somebody. There's somebody missing from
absolutely.
our
Mm-hmm.
family right now.
Yeah, that's something else that I did want to share too, is that I ended up going back to work maybe like 4 months after, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
therapy in between,
Yeah.
um, working a bedside job again. And I remember just like one day feeling so heavy with guilt this time for just not spending time with Alia, which is weird because she was in the ground already for weeks and weeks already. I just felt this guilt and shame, like, come on, you just like, she's lonely, she's just there, and I'm over here trying to move on with my life, trying to work again, trying to, get back up on my feet. But just the guilt was so heavy within me that I could not finish my shift. I had to leave in the middle of it, like 4 hours in, because I just kept crying. I just kept feeling tugged towards her gravesite, feeling like I just need to sit there with her. Um, and that's something that I've had to learn throughout the year, was to do it, because your motherly instincts want for her or for them, for whoever you lost, like you just feel the need to do something. And so that was like just too much for me to bear. So I ended up leaving. I went to the store to get her some flowers, and I just sat there with her for the longest time, just crying and just being like, I'm here now, I'm here. Like I
Yeah.
was apologizing, I was doing everything. It's one of those things that you just have to process
Yep.
to get through, like.
Yep.
So that was so hard. I remember it was so hard. And
Yeah.
there's things that I've done throughout the year now that I feel peace in my heart that I do for her, like decorate her grave for every season, or I just look at her picture hung up in her room and look over the scrapbook and journal about her. I share a lot about her online.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what you do, right? You do the best you can
hmm
to share about who she
exactly.
was, and because that
hmm
she's very much part of your family, part of who you are now.
That's right.
Evelina, I really appreciate you telling us Alia's story, and I just want to say thank you so much for being open and willing to do that and sharing her online and letting people know that they're not alone in this, because it does feel really lonely. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.